And we are back. Welcome back to the King's Report, Thursday, December 7, 2017, broadcasting live to all the kings and queens of the Kingdom of God. Good morning, folks. It is 7:07, and we are here now joined with Patriot James May. Jim, can I call you Jim?
Sure.
Okay. Is a former Army chaplain who offers a very unique perspective on the price that has been paid for our nation's freedom. Born in DeWitt Army Hospital at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, he has grown up as a military brat most of his life. From 1999 to 2006, he had the honor of serving as an officer and chaplain in the U.S. Army. During his last 3 years on active duty, Chaplain May had the very unique privilege of serving in Iraq with the soldiers on the front lines. At Walter Reed Army Hospital, with soldiers who have been injured in war, and at Arlington National Cemetery for those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation and our freedom. James has one brother who is in the Army, is an Army doctor, and another who is an Army signal officer. All three brothers are Iraq war veterans. His father, who served as the senior Army chaplain at Arlington National Cemetery on September 11, 2001, recently retired from active duty as a colonel. In 2006, James moved back to northeastern Pennsylvania, where he lives with his wife, Jill, and 3 children. His oldest son is currently serving in the Pennsylvania National Guard. 2009, he served as a campaign manager for Sam Rohrer. Candidate for governor in the 2010 general election, James served as the director of conservative outreach for Governor Tom Corbett, overseeing the outreach to all faith, family, and freedom coalitions. 2011, after serving on the governor's inaugural committee, he was recommended by Governor Corbett for his current position as a regional community relations coordinator for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. James and his wife have been working with a local homeschool ministry over the past few years, holding Bible studies in their home with dozens of students, and leading a mission trip to Ecuador in 2015 to work with the Chekwa, is that right? Chekwa people in the Andes Mountains.
Yes.
This March, he will be leading a group of 17 high school students who will be working in La Providencia, a family-based community of care for orphans and at-risk children in Siguatepec, Honduras.
Honduras, yes.
Wow. Jim, thank you so much. Such an honor to meet you.
A pleasure to be here.
Thank you for
Good
being
to
with
be
us
here.
this morning. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your history in Iraq. We're always interested to hear the stories of the veterans. There's any things that you want to share about that experience?
Well, you used the term that it was a privilege for me to serve, and it really is, like so many other people who serve. And I had this very unique perspective on freedom and on the war, in that I had this opportunity to serve in Iraq with the soldiers who were right on the front lines, over there fighting for our freedom, defending freedom. I came back from Iraq, and for the next year and a half, I worked at Walter Reed Army Hospital with those who have been injured at that point, it was mostly Iraq, but Iraq and Afghanistan. And I worked right in the surgery ward as a chaplain with those soldiers who had been injured. And then because I was in the Washington, D.C. area, every Friday afternoon, or every other Friday afternoon, I would go over to Arlington National Cemetery and help out with the funerals that were taking place. So it gave me this perspective on freedom, seeing from the soldier on the front lines to the soldier who had been injured to the soldier who had made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation and for our freedom. And, you know, looking back, especially on a day like today, December 7th, is a very significant day to look back and for all of us to just be reminded of the sacrifice that men and women have made for our freedom, and also what a tremendous blessing freedom really is. I think many of us, perhaps like me, who may have grown up in America or grew up in a freedom-loving country, we take that for granted sometimes, what a blessing it really is to live in a country that has freedom, and the sacrifices that have been made for our freedom, the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made for us for our ultimate spiritual freedom, but then also the sacrifice that soldiers make on a regular basis for our political freedom as well.
Wow, I mean, Christ said there's no greater love than laying your life down for your friends, and that's what Christ said, of course. All the brothers and sisters that are out there fighting on the front line, really fighting for our freedom, fighting for everybody, even people they disagree with. This is the most Christ-like thing you can do.
It is.
Love God, love your neighbor.
And when you look at that sacrifice, you know, in the political sense, a sacrifice was made for our freedom. And then in the spiritual sense, a sacrifice is made for our freedom. John 8 says, I think it's verse 31, that says, if the Son has set you free, you are free indeed. So whether you live in a country that has political freedom or does not have political freedom, either way, a sacrifice has been made for us. and that sacrifice is resulting in freedom. And so we have the freedom that comes either politically or the freedom that comes in Christ. And I think it's important for us to look back and to really try to understand the amount of sacrifice that is made for our freedom. I often say that I wish, as an Army chaplain, I could take, especially young people, I always think about some of our teenagers, to take every one of them, put them in a bus with me, and take them down to Walter Reed one day, and just walk around the hospital down there, and to look into the eyes and the faces of men and women who have made sacrifices for your freedom. I wish I could have them sit there with me in my office as a chaplain, and sit there and listen as a young woman comes in and she says, "Chaplain May, I'm 27 years old and I'm a widow." You know, she says her husband was killed in Iraq, and she said, you know, every night I come home and I sit down and I walk into an empty house, I sit down and eat dinner by myself, I watch TV by myself, I go to bed by myself. And she was telling me, she says, I always thought of the widow as the little old lady in my church, you know, who's lived a good long life. And she said, I'm 27 years old and I'm a widow. Wow. I wish they could stand there with me at the hospital bed with a young soldier who lost both of his legs, and he starts crying and he says, "Chaplain, the worst part about this now is that now I know I can't go back." He's not thinking about his legs, he's thinking about the fact that he wants to go back with his friends. I wish I could have him stand there with me at Arlington National Cemetery and watch as a woman who is pregnant with twins buries her husband. So much sacrifice that has been made for our freedom, and I think many times we don't fully understand nor do we appreciate what a sacrifice has been made, either on the political side or the spiritual side. On both of those, we don't fully understand how much a sacrifice has been made, and especially now as we're moving into the Christmas season, where we think about the fact that God himself became a man, came down to earth, and willingly sacrificed himself. As you said, greater love has no man than this, than he would lay down his life for his friends.
Yes. Well, this is so important. I think that all the vets and special forces, etc., you know, we are huge fans of the folks that are putting stuff on YouTube and stuff like that. We train our whole community in self-defense. All our young people, you know, train with us. We call them the peace ninjas. But, you know, we train them in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mixed martial arts, and Kali Eskrima, you know, that's Filipino knife and stick fighting, and also firearms training, et cetera, like that. And it's so important because it's a fundamental right for peoples to be able to defend themselves. But if you think about it, who has defended you? Who's defended you? Who is going out there in a place with no, you know, no praise? They're going out there, the men and women of the armed forces going out there to fight for you. And you're not even, the young people, never getting aware of that, you know? We love to take all our kids, exactly what you said, to go, you know, to the hospital that you were talking about.
Walter Reed.
Reed, and meet those folks. We'd love to do that. We'd love to take like a field trip down there and do exactly what you said.
And when we talk about freedom, sometimes we think about it as this sort of nebulous term. What does it mean to have freedom? Well, you know, we think about maybe religious freedom and things like that. But it does mean, what freedom means is that I should have the freedom to defend myself if somebody is breaking into my home. Freedom means we protect the Second Amendment. Freedom means that, that we have the ability. It's not just this sort of nebulous term out there. What are soldiers dying for? They're dying for freedom, but what does that mean? Practically speaking, what does that mean? A lot of things. It means, you know, we look at something like lower taxes. Well, it means that I have the freedom to keep more of what I earn. It means that I have the freedom as an unborn child has the freedom to life, to live.
Yes.
If I am a homeowner, whether or not I'm not, I have the right to defend my life and to defend my family from an intruder. What freedom means it's very practical. It's not just this nebulous term of, oh, we believe in freedom, soldiers have sacrificed for freedom. It has some very practical, everyday implications, and one of those is the ability to defend ourselves.
Well, you know, that's why we talk about the whole idea of sovereignty. You know, that people are able to have their own home. They're able to have their own. We talk about that as like the kingly rights. If you look at the satanic kingdoms of the past, all the satanic kings of the past had the right of private property. They basically could own the kingdom, and they had the right to defend that territory. Okay, but that was never given to the serf class or the slave class. And effectively what George Washington did is he basically allowed everybody in America to become kings. I mean, literally that's what he did. Yeah. And we have a castle doctrine, literally. And, you know, that's why we want to, we're so heavy on encouraging people, have your crown, meaning kind of representing your sovereignty. And of course, the Bible says as well in Revelation 3, let no man take thy crown, but also have the rod of iron. The rod of iron protects your crown, it protects your sovereignty, it protects your territory. And this is it's like a kingly right that the people of God obviously have from our King of Kings.
And that right comes from God, and that's what you're alluding to. It's not other nations and other places around the world. They look and they say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are given rights from their government, or they are given what America has said in other countries is that we understand that these rights are given to us by God. The role of the government is to protect them, but it's not it is not from the government that these rights are granted. These rights are granted from God. And for us to then understand, okay, they're rooted in something deeper. It's not just, well, the Constitution says I have the right to bear arms. The Constitution says that I have the right.
Right.
The Constitution says that because the Constitution is a reflection of the rights that have been given to us, granted to us by a sovereign God who has the right to give us and take away. And so he has said, yes, you have the right to do these type of things. It's much deeper, and that's what our soldiers are fighting for and defending for, whether they understand it fully or not. When we say that our soldiers are fighting for freedom, that's what they mean. That's what we mean. They're fighting to protect the freedoms that God has given to us as a nation. That's why they're doing that.
Well, it's interesting because there's studies that look at elementary school, middle school, high school. Up to 80% of kids are not even encountering a male teacher. Like 80% of the teachers are females. And of course, they can do a great job too, obviously. But they're not getting in contact with men educators that are until they're like in high school. And especially people who are vets or people who have to actually go and sacrifice, men who had to go out there and really become like alpha males.
Yes.
And so there's this whole toxic masculinity thing. Oh, there's a fear of this man. Testosterone is evil. Anything manly, anything masculine. God is a father. That's evil. That's misogynist.
Yes.
This kind of, it's all tied in with trying to tear down the man and making men ashamed of being, a force for good, to protect their families, to protect their communities, etc. And young people are not getting contact. How wonderful it would be if young people in public elementary school and middle school, just like they did 40 years ago, would do firearm safety class with vets or would learn different things from the vets, hear stories from them, meet them, you know what I mean? And get contact with them.
It's a great, and when we were in the military, one of the things that we would do is to go into some of the public schools, and I would take a number of my soldiers, and we would go in and do some mentoring in some of the inner city, in some of the poor sections with some of the children who didn't have that mentor in the home. And many times you can see this direct correlation between the poverty, the academic struggles, and a lack of a father figure, the lack of leadership in the home. And so I would take many of my soldiers in, and these guys, many of them didn't have much beyond a high school education, but they knew enough and they had the ability enough and they had the heart that they would go into some of these schools and sit down. We had a mentorship program. And I don't know how much the students learned on the academic side. I'm sure that they did. They learned how to, do their letters and do their numbers. But if nothing else, now they had a role model in their life, somebody who was coming along and working with them and saying to them, I am a strong, Army, tough, a hua soldier, as we say. I'm Army strong, and I care about you. And it's not just that we have to be either a tough, strong, fit Army guy or care about children. You say, here are some of the toughest men, and we had women, but it was mostly all men. Here are some of the toughest men that you can find out there. Army soldiers, Iraq war veterans, and they want to come in and they want to work with you. They don't want to be feminized, but they're going to come along and we're going to mentor you and work with you and help you become the man and women of God that you can be. So it was a really exciting program that we had there in the Washington, D.C. area.
Oh my goodness! We found it's so important because even when we're training kids in like the combat martial arts and stuff like that, it transforms their life because a lot of the girls, we have a big population of girls who train. Like even my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt coach who comes in and trains us too every week. When he comes, he's like, man, you got so many girls because a lot of these fight dojos do not have a lot of women.
Yeah.
You know, he's got like 300 students out there in White Plains, New York, but then he's like 5 girls, you know. It's
Right.
good. It's very rough. It's a rough fighting art. And, you know, just the women are not getting contact with that. But in our community, almost all our girls are training, you know,
Yes.
including my daughter, you know, the queen is also training, you know. So like we have an awesome culture here where we have a lot of, you know, females, a lot of women, a lot of young girls who are training. And they're getting contact with males. You know, they're getting around men who are good, who are protective, who are kind of sheepdog mentality. Obviously, those who serve in the army are even at a higher level. But they're getting around other men, and they're seeing that men who are masculine are not necessarily evil. They're not necessarily, because that's the brainwashing they get all the time. Toxic masculinity, toxic masculinity. It's always from Hollywood and MSM, and you know, it's just constant barraging. Like everything masculine is evil, everything feminine is good.
Right.
Which is crazy, because you can have tyrannical fathers, you can have loving fathers, you can have tyrannical mothers, you can have loving mothers. It's not always one way. And they, of course, want to package it in that very pagan mythological standpoint.
And it's the idea that you're either masculine or, which like you said, masculine, which is good, or you're feminine, or masculine, which is bad, or
bad,
feminine, which is good. And we assign certain attributes to certain characteristics. So something like, you know, well, if you're really masculine, you're not going to work with children. If you're really masculine, you're not going to care about other people. No, that's not, you know, the most masculine person to ever live was Jesus Christ. And,
right.
you know, there are certain times where he goes into the temple and he drives out the money changers, and he says, enough is enough. He was a carpenter. You know, sometimes the picture that we have of him has been feminized. And,
completely.
you know, and so he is a very masculine individual, and yet he's working with children, yet he's caring for the less fortunate. He's working with the orphans.
Yes.
You know, he comes and at the end of his life in the book of James, they say, okay, how do you describe religion? What is pure religion? And James 1:27 says, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to keep yourself unspotted from the world is half of it. And we think about that, but also to care for the widows and orphans in their distress. And so, you know, how do you sum up? Jesus Christ came, he established religion on the earth, he established Christianity. How do you sum that up? Well, part of it is keeping your relationship with God correct, and part of it is caring for widows and orphans. And we forget that many times, and that's what it's all about.
I mean, isn't it almost like there's a satanic force that is trying to demonize the fatherly masculine figure? Because in the end, Satan knows God is the Father, is the Son, the Holy Spirit. He knows it. So he wants to make the whole culture hate the Father, hate this masculine figure.
Yeah.
And they want them to love Gaia, Mother Earth, or whatever the goddess is that they're pushing at the time, or Madonna as the goddess, or whatever it is. Absolutely crazy. But there are, of course, we not only fight against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. There's real spiritual forces in operation here.
Absolutely, absolutely true. And I look at my own father, and I think that the role model that he has had and continues to have in my life, you know, he as you read in the bio, he spent 34 years in the military. The first 16, I think it was, I forget the exact number. First 8 was in the United States Marine Band, the President's Own. He was a fanfare trumpet player at the White House. But he was a Marine during the Vietnam War, a Marine. And again, that combination of, we think of something like music as being more on the feminine side, but to be a Marine who's doing music for the president. And so you bring those together and you say, you know, we can be involved in the arts, we can be involved in helping children, we can be involved in all those type of things and still be a Marine, still be tough, still be one of the, you know, a man's man kind of person. And that has been passed down to his children, and my desire is to pass it down to my children as well. And I know that that's your desire as well.
Amazing, amazing. Folks, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back after this with more with Jim May. Stay with us.
Just be wasn't that fun shooting this Tommy gun today?
It's always fun shooting Tommy guns. This one especially. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
All polished and chromed up. It really looks like $1 million.
Yeah. Elliot Ness would have loved one of those.
Yeah, and it's available right now in your favorite dealer, and you go pick one up.
Yeah, just have him call your distributor.
I mean, the gun, you know, was initially made way back when, back in the 27 is this one.
Yeah, Model 27.
I was surprised by how quick it knocked down those plates.
Oh, 3.5 second run, under 3.5 second run, knocking down a plate right. 341.
I mean, the gun is heavy. It's about what, 12, 14 pounds, especially with this drum. But it's surprising how quick you can go with it. It would actually make quite a good self-defense rifle at home.
If I climbed in somebody's window and they were aiming that at me, I think I'd get out of there real quick. So
that sounds about right to me.
Just the intimidation factor alone.
Fire!
Hi, I'm Joby Gorgas with Magnum Research. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our new L5 and 44 mag. This is our 5-inch model, lightweight model. It's got an aluminum grip frame, shaving down the weight so that we can get it under 50 ounces so that it's New York legal. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to properly hold the L5 for function. When shooting a Desert Eagle, you want to make sure that your dominant arm is locked out, pushing back into the back of the grip. Your secondary hand is holding around the front of the grip to keep the muzzle flip down. This gives you a good firm hold for proper cycling. We got to remember that the Desert Eagle is a gas-operated rotating bolt semi-automatic pistol, not unlike an AR system. I also want to talk to you about the stance for shooting the Desert Eagle. When shooting the Desert Eagle, you need a good firm base, so you want to step into your direction, get that arm locked, that support hand on, and lean forward into it so that you can handle that recoil.
Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group, with a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group, made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
Dry the tears from your eyes.
All right, folks, we are back. Welcome back. Thursday, December 7th, 2017. Broadcasting live from the Chenigu Studios. To all the kings and queens of the kingdom of God, keep hold of your crown and your rod of iron, folks. We are joined here 7:33 a.m. with James May, Pastor James May, Chaplain James May. And during the break, we were talking about, you know, some of, if you could share something about your experience in Iraq, in the different places you've been stationed, even the ones that are hard to bring up again, even traumatic. It's important for us as civilians to hear that, so that we remember, you know, daily why we should be grateful for our armed service forces, and all the fine men and women that are serving in it, and you know how valuable a price has to be paid for freedom.
When I think about that price that is paid, the first picture that comes to mind is a young soldier that I saw. This is actually back at Walter Reed Army Hospital. And Walter Reed is the main hospital where most of our injured soldiers who have been injured over in Iraq and Afghanistan, most of them will come back to Walter Reed unless they're a burn victim, then they'll go down to San Antonio. But the place is just filled with soldiers who have lost legs, who have lost their arms, who have lost face. It's just an incredible place to see. But toward the end of my time there at Walter Reed, one day, I was walking through the hallway, and I was sort of getting nostalgic because I knew I was about to get out of the military, and I knew I was about to leave the ministry there at Walter Reed. And I looked at the very end of the hallway, and I saw this young soldier who, first of all, he just looked like the epitome of a young, tough, fit Army soldier. When you think about a man's man, he had the haircut, he had the build, everything about him just screamed Army strong. And I was looking at this young man walking toward me, and he had the haircut and everything about him. He was probably about 19 or 20 years old. But what I first noticed about him was that as he was walking down the hallway, he had a young girl that he was holding on to, and he was sort of hobbling his way down the hallway. And I could see from a distance that he had a prosthetic leg. He had a fake leg from the knee down, which is fairly common in there at Walter Reed. And I didn't know his story, but it was obvious he had probably lost his leg in Iraq or Afghanistan. And so as he was walking toward me, and I was thinking about my children, I was thinking about how many men like him, men and women, have sacrificed so much for us, I remember just looking at him and thinking, here is a young man who should be outside right now playing football or riding a motorcycle or basketball or hunting or doing something else other than hobbling down the hallway, holding on to this young girl. I don't know if the girl with him was a nurse or his wife or a girlfriend, but hobbling his way down the hallway there at Walter Reed. And I remember just looking at him and thinking, that right there is a picture of the sacrifice that has been made for your freedom. Don't ever forget that picture, because that's one soldier who has sacrificed so much for your freedom. Don't ever forget that one picture. Well, the two of us continued sort of walking toward each other, and I was making my way toward him, and he was walking toward me. And as eventually we would pass each other in the hallway there, as a good Army chaplain, I kind of looked over at him to smile and encourage him. And when I did, I looked over at him, and I realized at that moment that this young soldier had lost his leg, but the reason that he was hanging on to this girl and hobbling his way down the hallway was not because of his leg. When I looked over at him, I realized that he had lost his leg and had lost both of his eyes. Oh, I realized this young soldier was completely blind as he was hobbling his way down the hallway there. And I looked at him, and he passed me in the hallway there. And I remember just stopping, literally stopping in the hallway and turning around and watching this young soldier just hobble his way down the hallway and making a left there. And you know, when he did, I just stopped there in the hallway and I just watched him go, and I thought to myself, don't ever forget that picture of sacrifice. Don't ever forget how much men and women have sacrificed for your freedom. And so as I look back on my experience in Iraq with the soldiers on the front lines, at Walter Reed with those who have been injured, at Arlington National Cemetery with the families who have made the ultimate sacrifice, the one lesson that comes to mind, and you know, I use the term lesson, it's something that I had heard all my life, growing up in a military family, being born in an Army hospital. I heard all my life that the freedom you enjoy is because somebody sacrificed. Yeah. But when you're standing there and you look into the eyes, and the eyes can't look back because they were given for you in war, you realize the sacrifice is extremely significant. And so for me, just watching him, that was one of the times that I really began to understand the price and the sacrifice that was made for our freedom. But you know, the other thing that comes to mind is the fact that freedom, and this is almost bumper sticker like, freedom is a wonderful blessing, and we forget that sometimes. And for me, once I began to see, and I know that you've seen countries where they don't have freedom. I think when you go there and you see people who don't have freedom, that's when you begin to really understand and appreciate the freedom that we oftentimes take for granted. When we pulled into, at one point, we were in the very, very northern part of Iraq, and it's in the Kurdish area. And the Kurdish people are a group of people who sort of are they don't have their own country, they don't have their own land, they don't have their own, they're a separate ethnic group, separate religious group, and they're sort of a land to themselves. But we were coming into one of these, the Kurdish regions in the northern part of Iraq, and we had a translator with us, and he pointed to a cemetery on the side of a hill. And he said, the majority of the end dates in that cemetery are all the same day. And what he meant by that is we're going into a place where Saddam Hussein came in, and because the people were either the wrong religion, the wrong ethnicity, the wrong, politically, they were, for whatever reason, he says, look at that cemetery up there on that hill, and most of the end dates are all the same day. We're going into a town right now where a vast majority of the people were wiped out because they were the wrong religion, politic, ethnicity, whatever reason, they were wiped out. And as we would pull into this town, I wish so bad I could sort of just play it on the computer screen for everybody to see. We were treated like the Beatles in their heyday. I mean, we were rock stars as we went into these towns, because for a young Iraqi Kurdish child, their hero is not some football player or baseball player or soccer player or somebody from TV or a movie star. It's not somebody from American Idol or Iraqi Idol. Wow. Their hero was the American soldier who brought them freedom. And these kids would come up to us, as soon as we would get out of our vehicles, we would be surrounded by children who would swarm our vehicles. I've got pictures of it at home, just swarming our vehicles. And they would come up and start tugging on our sleeve, these little kids, and say, autograph, autograph. Because we were their hero. The American soldier who brought them freedom was their hero. And these kids didn't have pens. I mean, they could hardly eat. They didn't have pens, so we'd take pens out of our pockets. They didn't have paper, so these kids would roll up their sleeves, and they'd say, autograph, autograph. And we'd start signing our autograph on their arms, because to them, their hero was the American soldier who brought them freedom. And that is not shown, and that is not seen, and that story is not told very, very often by the mainstream press. That story is not shared, but when you go into a place where people don't fully understand freedom, it's an incredible blessing, and they understand it and they appreciate it much more than we do.
That's an amazing story. Because think about it, you guys experience that and you come back home and then you get attacked by Marxist professors and brainwash children.
And you know what?
That's crazy.
And we don't have nearly as bad as some of the men and women who came back, like from Vietnam and some other places where they were just spit upon. And that happens, you know, to soldiers oftentimes. That they're vilified, they're looked at as evil. You know, it's just one of those things where when people who have not had freedom before suddenly have a taste of freedom, they are the ones who fully appreciate. You know, I remember one time, and I don't want to belabor you too much here with war stories, but
no, we want to hear it.
I remember one time going into this barber shop, and one of the things that we learned was you can't stop when you're walking, because you, especially in the Kurdish area, very quickly you'll be surrounded by Iraqi Kurdish men, and they're all coming up to you just saying, thank you for my freedom. But at one point, we ended up in this little tiny barber shop. And it was probably about the size of this studio here that we have. Not a real big barber shop. And I decided to get a haircut, and a chaplain assistant, and we were both sitting down in the barber chair and getting a haircut. And pretty soon 2 or 3 Iraqi Kurdish men came in, and 4 or 5 more, and 3 or 4 more. And before I knew it, I'm sitting here in this barber shop, and there's probably 40 to 50 Iraqi men who are all literally crammed in, kind of like a subway in Korea, where they're all crammed in on the bus, and I've been to Korea. They're all crammed into this little barber shop, and they're all coming up to me and saying, thank you for my freedom. Thank you. I mean, they knew there were 2 American soldiers sitting there in the barbershop getting their haircut, and they all wanted to come in and just say, thank you for my freedom. One guy said to me, please tell Mr. Bush I said thank you for my freedom." I'm thinking, okay, if I ever see the president and have lunch with the president, I'll be sure to tell him. But they all said, "Thank you for my freedom." And, you know, at the end of that, as I was sitting there looking into the eyes of these men, the poverty in Iraq, the poverty in the Kurdish area, but especially down in the southern part of Iraq, when we first crossed in and came from Kuwait, across the border through Baghdad, incredible poverty. I mean, you know, I know you've traveled to other third world countries. Poverty, like most of us, cannot even begin to fathom. You know, you throw a bottle of water out the Jeep window and you watch little children, 5 and 6 years old, wrestling each other for a bottle of water. And so as I was sitting in that barber chair, I remember just looking at these men thinking, what is their life like? You know, what if I had been born in the home that they were born in, and I didn't know where the food for my next meal is going to come from? Most of us can't even fathom that. What if I didn't know how I was going to buy clothes for my children or shoes for my kids? The basic necessities of life, if that's what I was really worried about, not are my kids going to get the next iPhone or those type of things. If it was, how am I going to feed my children tonight? And as I was sitting there, just looking at all these men in this room, thinking to myself, what an incredible blessing that I have, and what would my life be like if I had been born there? At the end of the haircut, I pulled out my wallet and I decided I wanted to pay my barber, and I pulled out a $20 bill, and I was going to pay, like a good officer, I was going to pay for my chaplain assistant as well, $20 for his haircut as well. I found out later that that was probably about a month's salary to that barber. And I say to people a lot of times, how would you react if you were in a situation where you literally didn't know where the food for your next meal was going to come from, you didn't know how you're going to buy clothes, you didn't know where the basic necessities of life were going to come from, and somebody came along and said, "Thank you for the haircut, here's $3,000, the equivalent. Here's a month's salary. Thank you for the haircut. Here is more money than you will get an entire month. Thank you for the haircut." What would your reaction to that be? You know, for most of us, we'd say, boy, I would grab that and I'd hang on to it so tight, I'd stick it in my pocket, and I'd run to the bank and go buy something for my children. I went to hand my barber $20 and for my assistant as well. His response to me was this, and I hope and pray I never forget it, because I think it's an example of the blessings that we have. Went to hand a guy who doesn't know where the food for his next meal is going to come from thousands of dollars, and he said to me, he says, "No, no, no." He says, "You brought me freedom. For you, it's free." And I said it a second time, I mean, understanding the poverty that he has and what $20 means to him. I mean, $20 to an American is not that big of a deal. I could have parted with it and not thought another thing about it. And I says, "No, please, please, I want you to take this." And he says a second time, he says, "You brought me freedom." He says, "No charge for you. No charge. You brought me freedom." And I think about that and the blessing, you know, the sacrifice that is made for our freedom. When you see the young man who gave his eyes for our freedom, when you stand there at Arlington National Cemetery with a young woman who is pregnant with twins and she's burying her husband. You know, you begin to see that sacrifice that has been made. But on the other hand, for me, serving in Iraq, serving at Walter Reed, serving at Arlington, you also see the blessing that freedom is, and it is a wonderful, tremendous blessing. And when we look and we say, what's happening in the world politically, one of my concerns, quite frankly, is that we have men and women who are dying for our freedom in Iraq and Afghanistan, yet we have politicians in Harrisburg who are taking those same freedoms away. We have men and women who are giving their life for freedom, giving their eyes for freedom, giving their legs for freedom, sacrificing for this wonderful blessing called freedom that in a vote in Washington, D.C. can be taken away. That through the work that they do, it's taken away. Because freedom, when you take money out of my wallet and give it to some guy down the street because he can't afford his house, you're taking away my freedom to earn more of what I keep. When you take money out of my wallet and my checkbook and you give it to somebody for cash for clunkers or because somebody doesn't want to work.
Government program.
All of these government programs, it's a disincentive to those who are getting the help many times because you're saying, okay, we're going to subsidize you. But what it also is doing is it's taking away my freedom to keep more of what I earn. When you take away my right to defend myself in my home.
Or to donate to causes you want to.
to donate to those causes, yes. Every one of those is rooted in freedom. And that's why it's so important that we understand the sacrifice that has been made, the blessing that it is, but then the connection that it has to what's going on in our nation today. Because it's when all of these, when various laws are being passed, it's not just bad policy. You're taking away freedom, and we don't understand, but we need to understand how much has been sacrificed for that freedom, for us to defend ourselves in our home, to keep more of what we earn, the freedom for an unborn baby to live. Those are all issues that are rooted in freedom.
Wow, that's why I thank God for, the Constitution, also for our armed forces that are out there sacrificing themselves. We had Mr. Larry Pratt on, who is the Chief Director of Gun Owners of America, and we'll be meeting him again in Switzerland. We'll have a conference in Switzerland about peace, police, peace, militia. So, having a civilian armed population, which is absolutely critical to just like the Founding Fathers said, to stand up against a government that has gone tyrannical. Yes. Because humans are corruptible, and when they have absolute power and everything's centralized, they get corrupt.
They do. And a lot of people ask me, well, is it okay for a civilian to have this type of gun or this type of gun or this type of magazine? My response is very simple. I say anything that a drug dealer or a gang member can obtain illegally, I should have the same right to purchase that legally. Because of that, if you don't have that same right, what ends up happening is the only people who have whatever type of gun you want to outlaw, the only people that then have that are the gang members and the drug dealers and the criminal aspect. They will get it illegally. So I say, okay, for those of you that want to outlaw a certain gun, can you guarantee me 100% that no gang member will ever have that same type of gun? Well, of course they can. Can you guarantee me that no drug dealer is ever going to have the same type of magazine that you're trying to outlaw? Well, if you can't guarantee me that, don't talk about keeping me from purchasing something legally that somebody else can purchase illegally. If a gang member can get it, if a drug dealer can get it, if a criminal element can get it illegally off the black market, I should have the right to purchase that same weapon legally. And because if that doesn't happen, then what ends up taking place is you have law and you have the rule of law taking place by the criminal aspect. And we see that in some of the South American, Central American countries where the gang members essentially rule everything because the guy with the biggest weapon makes the rules. And that's what's happening. And that's why we need to protect the Second Amendment here in the United States.
It becomes like basically might equals right. It becomes this whole Hitlerian thing. It's interesting because even in the late 1800s, Nietzsche, of course, one of the main atheist philosophers, he prophesied, and I'm not obviously biblical prophecy, but he said that in the future, because Western civilization is getting rid of the God ideal. He didn't believe in God and the Christian God, but because we're abandoning this the God ideal of Judeo-Christianity. Okay, it's not a different God. It's not a different pagan God. It's not Baal. It's not the Islamic God. It's the Judeo-Christian understanding of what God is.
Yes.
Because we abandoned that, even this atheist in the late 1800s predicted that the 20th century would be filled with genocide. Because it's either that vacuum is going to be filled with nihilism or it's going to be filled with pathological ideologies like communism or socialism or centralized oligarchies, which we call political Satanism, all that political Satanism, because it creates the environment for actual Satanism. We had like Zachary King, who was a 26-year Satanist high priest.
I saw that.
That was crazy.
I
crazy.
saw that interview.
And he's a guy who broke the Planned Parenthood thing, where the Satanists, Wiccans, and Luciferians gather at these Planned Parenthood locations, like their church. They get access to the fetuses, and they want to use them in satanic rituals. That's why they're gathering there.
Unreal.
And they're saying it's their right. It's their constitutional right to be able to kill babies. Incredible.
And if you don't start off with the fundamental prerequisite that says we hold these truths, that says there is truth, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That starts off with the assumption that there is truth and that there is creation. And we hold these truths, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those three things, the freedom, the self-evident truth that we are created with the ability to enjoy life, to protect life, to defend life, to live as an unborn child. Those are all rooted. If you take away the fact that there isn't, if you say there is no absolute truth and there is no creator, everything else after that first portion of the sentence simply goes away. If there is no truth and there is no creation, then you can't say we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That has to be rooted in a fundamental understanding that truth exists and God exists. Amazing.
And like even in Genesis, man and woman are made in the image of God.
Yes.
So this is not like Islam where women is actually 50% of the man, even in terms of, and that affects their Sharia jurisprudence. You know, how they see women testimony as 50% of men. Whereas in Western civilization, the fact that women are having the right to vote and they're treated as equals comes from a Judeo-Christian framework. It comes from that framework which all men and women, every race, creed, color, you know, doesn't matter. We're made in the image of God. Even a criminal, right? Even a criminal. We have due process for that criminal. There's something sovereign even about a bad person who did evil things that we must afford them some type of integrity or honor as a human being. And so we don't just believe allegations. You have to show evidence, you know, and there has to be due process.
And when you take that away, what ends up happening for those who do away with the concept of God, the whole concept of right and wrong really begins to get muddled. When you say, well, what constitutes a person? You know, there's this whole personhood idea. And they say, well, you know, you have to have some sort of self-realization. You have to have some... Well, does that mean that somebody in a coma is no longer a person?
Yes.
Does that mean that the unborn is no longer a person? You know, what constitutes... If it's based upon intelligence, does that mean that somebody who's smarter is more of a person than somebody who's mentally handicapped? And you know, and that's happening in the world today, where the mentally handicapped, because we don't define personhood and say, what defines a person? Okay, we are different from the animals, not just because we're smarter or we're self-aware. We're different from the animals because we were created in the image of God. We were given a soul. We were set apart and created distinctly from a snake, or a deer, or anything else, or you know, the smartest monkey, the smartest monkey in the world. But if you don't have that understanding, what ends up happening, you say, okay, what do you do with a mentally handicapped person who's in a coma right now? And you compare that to the smartest monkey who can do all sorts of tricks. Well, in their mind, they're going to say, well, if it's simply based upon intelligence, then the monkey has more inherent value than the person does. Or a dog that can do tricks has more inherent value than a person who's in a coma or the unborn. And we have this whole thing backwards if you don't start with the premise that there is truth and that God is the designer and the giver of that truth and that we are created human beings by God. That has got to be fundamental in who we are as a nation and who we are as a people.
Well, you probably heard in Saudi Arabia, they've allowed AI to be considered citizens.
I saw that. Yeah, and you know that whole question is going to be coming up here. And you know what constitutes a human? And you know the whole idea that we're at that point is just incredible in our nation. But we're seeing it on both ends. That if somebody is mentally handicapped bad enough, or if they're in a coma bad enough, are they no longer human? Or on the other end, if somebody is a computer that seems to be smart enough, if Siri can answer all my questions, is that a human? Well, what constitutes a person being a person? Well, I believe it's that they were created by God in the image of God with a soul, that they were created as a human being, and it's not based upon their intelligence, it's not based upon whether or not they're still living in the womb. A person is a person is a person. I think that's Dr. Seuss who said something like that. You know,
that's why it's banned. Dr. Seuss not banned.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's something that is so, as our founding fathers said, self-evident. It's so, you know, they use that term self-evident. It's so obvious we shouldn't even be having this discussion. We shouldn't even be going here. It's self-evident, but yet we as a nation and we as a people don't fully understand because we have gotten away from the concept of there is a God who has created us.
Incredible. I want to talk to you so much more about this because there's chimeras and these people are trying to mix goats with you. That's just great. Anyways, we're going to jump off now. We only have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about your homeschooling program and how people can get in contact with you, some of your websites, etc. But let us know about your homeschooling program.
Well, the homeschooling program actually started from a Bible study that we did on creation. Now, Ken Ham is one of the leading scholars right now in the issue of creation. And so my wife and I were we were with him one day. And most of the time what happens is you have your ministry, you're working with the young people at your church or the young marrieds, and you go find some material to work. My wife and I did it backwards. We bought some material, and we said, we're going to go use this somewhere. And so we didn't know when I bought it. I had no idea if I was going to be working with married couples or children, so I bought some material. And a couple weeks later, I said to my wife, I said, how about we look at doing a Bible study in our home for homeschool kids? We were, our middle son, we were homeschooling him and our youngest daughter. And I said, let's just put word out. I said, it'd be really neat if we can have, 6 or 7 kids come over to the house on Tuesday night, and we'll just put word out there and see who comes. The first week, we opened our doors, we had 43 students come to our house. So we're scrambling, setting up chairs, and through that we realized there was a huge need for this in our community. And so we started this ministry that we do with homeschool kids. Real quick, what we do is 1 year I teach a course through at what was Baptist Bible College, Clark Summit University. I teach a course called Introduction to Business Management and Communication. The kids go out, they do real world businesses, they put together a business plan, they raise real world money. We end up going down to Disney World, they go to the Disney Leadership Program down there, and they do real world stuff. The opposite year of that, we do a program in which we focus on the 4 P's, and it's passion for God, personal finance. We want them to work through protocols and manners, and a personality test where they go through and they find out what they're good at. But the last aspect of the class that I'm doing right now is this passion for God aspect, and we take the kids on a missions trip. 2 years ago, we went down to Ecuador, worked with the Quechua Indians down there. This March, I'm taking a group of 17 homeschool students. We're going to go down to La Providencia, it's a school for orphan and at-risk children down in Honduras. Great ministry. And these kids are going to be working, they're running some, sort of like a vacation Bible school for the orphan children down there. They're going to be running this. The school has set up the entire week is going to be sort of like this spiritual emphasis week at the school. Our kids are doing music, they're doing puppets, they're leading Bible studies. Right now they prepare, we get together every Thursday for about an hour and a half, and they're preparing, they're raising money, and they're going to go in, and anytime you do a missions trip, the beneficiaries are those that you go to minister to, the teachers there, the students there, the orphans in this school, but it's also the students from right here in the community who go down and they have their life changed by going into a third world country, going into a country where people make $2 a day and working with these orphans. And it's an incredible ministry. My daughter and I went about a year ago down and worked at the orphanage. She's looking at going back at Christmas time, but we're going to take 17 students and go down there and minister down there. And really excited about that.
How do people sign up for that? Do you just only do the kids that you're working with, or do you let other people sign up?
Well, right now it's the students that most of them all signed up about 3 or 4 months ago, and they did sign up. If someone wants to talk to me offline, they can do that. But yeah, they're working now toward the fundraising aspect of it. They do bake sales. We set up a sort of like a GoFundMe, but it's called Give Send Go. Are you familiar with that at all?
Give Send Go.
Give Send Go. It's a Christian run. Look at it. It's really neat. Give Send Go. It's GoFundMe, but it was set up by Christians, and they don't take a percentage out unless you choose to give. It's all mission organizations around the world. Give Send Go is kind of and I'm not here advertising for Give Send Go, but I learned about this. It's set up for missionary organizations, and so we have a Give Send Go page set up. It's GiveSendGo/Honduras 2018, and all the money.
Donate to that.
You can go there. It's the same as GoFundMe. It has the same safety precautions on it as a GoFundMe account does, but it was set up a number of years ago by Christians who want to support mission work around the world. And so there's a lot of your mission agencies now. I would encourage all of your viewers to, I know they just had the Giving Tuesday a few weeks ago, in which people give to organizations, but it's a great way, if you're looking for organizations on there, it's like GoFundMe. But this is not because, GoFundMe because I want to buy a new radio from my dorm and I want to buy this, all the crazy stuff that's on GoFundMe. This is for mission organizations. So the kids set up a Give Send Go page, and it's GiveSendGo/Honduras 2018. And so they're raising money there.
Amazing.
And just a really exciting opportunity that they have right now.
Incredible.
Give, Send, Go. Yes, www.GiveSendGo. Yep.
Now, give us some of your other websites that you have, maybe your chaplain work, et cetera, that people can contact you. How do they, you were talking about, you take people down to the vets hospital down there in Virginia. That would be a great trip for churches to do.
Oh, it is, yeah. And my dad, I know you read this very briefly. My dad was actually the senior chaplain at Arlington National Cemetery. He had a book written. He was featured on local TV here recently on September 11th. Real quick, his story, he started off as the bugler at Arlington National Cemetery during the Vietnam War, played taps at Arlington literally thousands of times for soldiers who came back and who made the ultimate sacrifice. As a young bugler, he used to watch the Navy chaplain, and he always wondered what that Navy chaplain was saying to the family. So he left the Marine Corps, went back, got his, a Master of Divinity, a doctorate degree, went back in as an Army chaplain. Fast forward then almost 30 years later, he then became the senior Army chaplain at Arlington National Cemetery, and he was there on September 11th when the planes hit right across the street at the Pentagon. And yeah, he oftentimes will go with me when we go down there, and obviously he has a lot of connections there at Arlington, at the Vietnam Wall, and we lived in the Washington, D.C. area for a number of times. But I guess the easiest way would just simply be email. I'm at jamesmaygop, jamesmaygop at gmail.com. And so, yeah, if people have any other questions, they can just email me there, jamesmaygop at gmail.com. That's the easiest way.
Fantastic. James, it's been such an amazing hour just to spend time with you and to hear about all your incredible experience. We're so honored to have you here and, of course, to meet you in person. Amazing work that you're doing. So, so important. We thank Jim, of course, for sharing all that information with all of you. Thank you all for joining us this morning on the Community Report. We'll see you tomorrow as co-heirs with Christ. Stay strong with your crown and rod of iron, and we'll see you tomorrow sharp, 5 a.m. sharp in the morning. Nice, bright and early. God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come. We'll see you tomorrow.